Masechet Shabbat daf beis Amud Aleph. Baruch Hashem, Hoidel Hashem ki tov ki lamchazda. We have the great schos. We have the great schos to start Masechet Shabbat, a new Masechet Shabbat. It's all the Yesodus of Shabbat, the halachas of Shabbat. By way of a short introduction, so we know that in Hilchos Shabbat, the foundations are the 39 Avos Malachas. The 39 malachas that were needed to perform the avodah in the Mishkan. There are 39 primary categories, and those are the avos malachas where there is an isser deraisa if anyone performs any of these malachas. Anything similar to these avos malachas, to these primary categories, something that's similar to it, is a tolda. It's called a tolda. Something that's similar to tolda is also awesome deraisa. And both by the avos and by the toldas, almost without exception, there are exceptions, but almost without exception, if a person does it b'mezid, he's chayav skila. If he does it b'shoigeg, he's chayav chatas. If he does it b'mezid without hasra, then there's karis. Those are the punishments involved for the avos, and those are the onshim as well for the toldas. The difference between avos and toldas, so we'll see later in the Masechta, we'll see why it makes a difference if something is an av, why is it a tolda, why are they categorized as avos, and why are they a toldas. The first malacha that the Masechta begins with is the malacha of haitzah, of caring. Tosfos asks the question that why should the Masechta start with haitzah, with the malacha of haitzah? The avos malachas are on Daf Ein Gimel, Periklal Gadol. That's where the Mishnah lists the avos malachas, and that's where there's a discussion in detail of the avos malachas. And in fact, the malacha of haitzah is the last one on the list of 39. So why does the Masechta begin with the malacha of haitzah? So Tosfos answers several answers, but among them he answers that haitzah is common. It's a common thing. The person carry things from one place to another place. So that's why it's mentioned at the beginning. Tosfos also answers that it's very intricate. There are a lot of chiddush halachas negeya to haitzah. So it's chaviv to the Tana. He begins with the malacha of haitzah. So what is haitzah? The malacha is haitzah, caring. The tolda is hachnasa. What's the difference between haitzah and hachnasa? Haitzah is caring from a reshus hayachid, from a private domain, for instance a house, to a reshus harabim. So that's haitzah, taking it out, carrying it out. Taking out from the reshus hayachid, let's say from his house to the street, that's haitzah. Achnasa is bringing it from the street into the house. That's achnasa. They're both awesome in the raisa. But haitzah is the av, and the tolda is achnasa. Now, as opposed to other malachas, we find this written in the Torah. Whereas opposed to the other malachas, it's not written beferish in the Torah, it's what was needed for the Mishkan. Here we have it written in the Torah, both the Av and the Tolda. We'll see why. We'll see why shortly. So the Av is haitzah. What is haitzah? So as we said, it's taking out from the reshus hayachid to the reshus harabim. But it doesn't mean just taking it out. It involves different steps. One is akira. That means lifting an object from its place of rest, which the place of rest, what it's on, will be defined as we go through this parak in the Masechta. It's an akira. It has to be an akira from a mokum chashuv, from its place, its normal place of rest. That's akira. Then there's haitzah. So a person picks it up, let's say from his table, picks it up from the ground in his house. That's the akira. There's haitzah. Then he carries it out into the street. But that doesn't end with that. Then there's hanach. There's putting it down. So those three steps, if a person does all of that, then he is chayav for hoitzah. If he does part of it, if he does the akira but not the hanacha, if he does hanacha without the akira, it's also midrabanan. It's not chayav, it's what Rabbanan call potter. He's potter. Hachnosa is the similar type of process. It's picked up from the street. There's an akira from the ground. It's brought into the house and it's put down. If you have those steps, then it's hachnosa and it's chayim in the rice. If there is an akira without hanacha without akira, it's also midrabanan. It's potter. Then it's potter. So now let's go through the Mishnah. And the Mishnah will detail these different steps with some intricacies. And we'll get to more of the picture of what's involved with hoitzah and with achnosa. Now, as we go later on to the Masechta, there's other aspects of caring, there's other aspects of this broad malacha, and it becomes much broader. For instance, there is caring for Amos and Rishus Rabim, not from a Rishus Yach to Rishus Rabim, but caring in a street, picking something up and transporting it at least all in Amos and putting it down. So there's that aspect. There's throwing, there's passing from one. All of these things, this will be discussed, and we'll get into detail through the Masechta. But this Mishnah, the Masechta begins with hoitzah and achnosa. So let's see the Mishnah. Yitzias Hashabbos Shtein Shein Arba B'fnim, V'Shtein Shein Arba B'chutz. The Yitzias Hashabbos. So it says Yitzias, but what the way it means over here is hoitzahs. Hoitzahs, transporting from one rishus to the other. So Taisus points out why it says Yitzias, why doesn't it say hoitzahs? It would seem to be more precise to use the word hoitzahs. So he says because it follows the lashon of the pasuk that says al yetze ish mimekaymai, and from there we learn out al yetze al yetze. So we learn out hoitzahs from this pasuk al yetze ish mimekaymai. That's why it's called Yitzias. So Yitzias Shabbos, the Shtayim Shein Arba Bifnim. There are two which become four. There's two Doraisa. And when you add on the Isser D'Rabbanans involved, there's four cases of Isser. Bifnim, that's for a person standing inside. So, for instance, in terms of the marshal that the Mishnah will use, if you have a person standing in his house, we call him a balabayas. So for the person who is in the house, there's Shtayim Shein Arba, two Deraisa, which become four when you add in the Rabbanans, which Shtayim Shein Arba b'chutz, and two which are four for a person standing outside, which the Mishnah will call an ani. So an ani, he wants to take something, he's asking for a donation, he's asking for something from the balabayas puts it in his hand. We use this terminology just to illustrate a person standing inside, a person standing outside, a balabayas, and an ani. Ketzad. So now the Mishnah will illustrate. Ketzad ha'ani amir b'chutz. The ani is standing out. U'balabayas b'fnim. And the balabayas is inside. Pashat ha'ani is yora lifnim. If the ani puts his hand inside, he sticks his hand into the house. Pashat ha'ani is yora lifnim. Nasan l'soyach yora shabalabayas. And he puts something into the hands of the balabayas. So what does that mean? That means that the ani picked up something from the street, took something, and he stretched his hand into the house, and he put it into the hand of the person inside the house, into the hands of the balabayas. So what did he do? He did a hachnosa. He did an akira and a hanacha. He brought from the street into the house. He did a hachnosa, and he did it completely. So he's chayav. Or if he's not he took it from the hand of the balabayas and he brought it out. How ani chayiv? Balabayas potter. Then the ani is chayiv. The ani is chayiv midaraisa because he did the whole thing. And the balabayas is potter, which this is not the normal terminology of potter. and because really he didn't do anything at all. The Balabayas was completely passive. He didn't do anything at all over. The Gemara is going to deal with this and discuss why he uses Lashon of Potter, which normally means that there's an Isser D'Rabbanan. But in this case, the Ani did everything. So this is Shtayim, this is two deraisas for the Ani. He picked up something from outside, brought it in, and put it into the hands of the Balabai. So he did Akira and Hanacha, and he did a Hachnosa. He brought it inside the house, or he stretched his hand and took it from the hand of the Balabai. So he did the Akira, he brought it outside, put it down, and he did a Hanacha. So he did an Akira Hanacha with Hoitzah. So that's the two deraisas of the Ani. Now continue on. Pasha Balabayas as Yara Lechutz. In the similar case, by the Balabayas, if the Balabayas stretches his hands outside, so he picked up something from the house, he stretched his hand out, and he put something in the hands of the Ani. So he did an Akira. He took some food. He wanted to give it to the Ani. He took some food from the table. He did an Akira. He stretched his hand out, put it into the hands of the Ani. He did a Hanocha, so the Balabayas did a Hoitzah. He did an Akira and a Hanocha, he did a Hoitzah, so he's Chayiv. Or if he took something from the hand of the Ani and he brought it inside the house and put it down, so he did an Akira from the Rishus Harabim, brought it inside the house, put it down, he did an Akira Hanocha, and he did a Hachnosa, Balabayas Chayiv, Ani Potter. So we have Shtayim by the case of the Ani, Shtayim by the case of the Balabayas, two cases where, in both cases, where there is Akira and Hanocha, there is Hoitzah and Hachnosa, and these are the Deraisa Dika cases. These are the Deraisa Dika cases where, for the Ani, for the Balabayas, they did, each one has a case over here where each one did Hoitzah and the Hachnosa. Tosfos asks the following question. He asks, well, really, what's the difference if it's an Ani or a Balabayas? Why should that make any difference? The point is that there's a Hachnosa and there's a Hoitzah. There's a Hoitzah, Chayiv for Hoitzah, there's a Kira and Hanacha from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, or there's a Hachnosa, there's an Akira from the Rishus HaRabim, and there's a Hanacha inside the Rishus HaYachid. What difference does it make if it's an Ani or a Balabayas? The principle is if it's a Hoitzah or a Hachnosa. Why should it make a difference, and why do we have to be told that it applies both to the Ani and to the Balabayas? What's the difference? In each case, there's a Hoitzah and a Hachnosa. Tosfos answered, and this is a principle that we'll see that goes throughout this Malacha, that Hoitzah is called a Malacha Grua. It's called a Malacha that on our own, it's hard to understand. Why is that? Because a person, we don't really comprehend, well, what's the difference? What's the difference of the caring? We understand that caring could be considered a labor. We can consider that the caring could be considered a malacha. But what's the difference? Why specifically from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, or Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid? What's the difference if he carries from there, or from one house to another house? In our understanding, we don't really see what the difference is. If carrying is considered a labor, is considered a malacha, what's the difference if it's from house to street, street to house, or if it is from house to house? Now, that you need an akira and a hanocha, and it has to be from its resting place to its resting place, that we can understand, because that's the normal way that things are transported. But why is it Davke Rishus HaYachid or Rishus HaRabim? The Ramban says, even more, he says, it's something that's difficult to understand because a person can be carrying a heavy load from one end of his house to the other. He can have a very big house, and he can be carrying furniture the whole day from one end to the other end of the house. And in the Raisa, that is not a malacha. That's not a malacha of Hoitzah. Even though he's carrying and he's schlepping and the whole day back and forth, that's not considered a malacha. He can pick it up, he can pick up a chair, take it from one end and put it down the other end, that's not a malacha. But if he takes a small item, if he takes a very small item, a very light item, as long as it has some chashivas, and he takes it from the house to the street, he's chayiv in a minute. So it's a malacha grua. And therefore, as we mentioned earlier, Haitzah, we learn it from a pasuk. We learn it from, and both the Av and the Tolda, they're both learned out from Sukkim. They're both learned out from Sukkim. And therefore, we need that. The Torah has to teach us by Haitzah because it's a malacha grua. Because on our own, we would not have said that this is a malacha, or we would not have said it's a malacha in this manner. Therefore, therefore, the Tana has to tell us both by the Balabais and by the Ani, because since it's a malacha grua, we might have differentiated. We might have said, well, maybe it's specifically in this case and not in the other case. So the Tana has to elaborate and tell us that it applies both by the Balabais and by the Ani. Okay, so this is now Mishnah said these are the two cases where there's deraisas, there's two deraisas, shtaim. The shtaim, there's two deraisas by the Balabais, two deraisas by the Ani. Now the Mishnah is going to discuss the derabbanos. So now if the Ani, he did the akira, he picked it up from the street, he stretched his hand inside, but he did not put it down. The Balabais took it from his hand. So the Ani only did the akira. He didn't do the hanacha. So he's not chayim d'oraisa. He only did the akira. So then there's no isur d'oraisa. This is an isur d'rabbanan. Or if the Balabais put it into his hand and the Ani took it out and then put it down on the street. So in this case, the Balabais did the akira and the Ani did the hanacha. Shnei Patur. They're both part. There's an Isser D'Rabbanan. Shnei Patur. Now, as we'll see in the Gemara, there is really an Isser D'Rabbanan on each end of it. There's an Isser D'Rabbanan to do an akira without a hanacha. There's an Isser D'Rabbanan to do a hanacha without an akira. Any part of the malacha, midaraisa, you have to do all the components. But midrabanan, any part, akira without hanacha, hanacha without akira, is also midrabanan. However, as we'll see in the Gemara, the Tana, our Tana is only listing the akiras. Because from an akira, it can lead to eventually you started to pick it up. You yourself could put it down. So we'll see in the Gemara later, and we'll see that we're only discussing the akiras over here, and we'll give reasons for it. But I'll call upon him. So in this case over here, you have an akira for the Balabais, and there's an akira for the Ani, which is an Isser D'Rabbanan. Now Mishnah continues, Pashat Balabais es Yorelchut. So now if the Balabais, he picked up them item, and now he took it outside, and he did not put it down. The Ani took it from his hand. So here, the Balabais did an akira with Haitzah. An akira with Haitzah. Or he stretched his hand, and the Ani put it into his hand, and he brought it in. So now here, there is an akira for the Ani with achnasa. Shnei Patur, and they're both patur. So in summary, the malacha of Haitzah there's a malacha of Haitzah, d'oraisa, which is taking it from the private domain to the public. It involves an akira and a hanacha. And to be chayiv in d'oraisa, one person has to do both. If it's split up by two people, there's no chiv d'oraisa. Hachnasa is the tolda is bringing it in from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid, also with an akira and an anocha. To be chayiv, one person has to do both. If it's split between two people, there's no isur d'oraisa. So shitzis shtayim shein arba bifnim for the balabais. There's two d'oraisas. If he does the akira and anocha for Haitzah, and if he does a complete akira nocha for the hachnasa, and two derabbanans if he does just an akira without a hanocha. and the hanocha is done by someone else, by the ani. Similarly, by the ani, there's two deraises. If he does the akira and the hanocha for achnosa, or akira nach v'oitzo, he's chayev. He's chayev deraisa, and there's two derabbanans if he does an akira without a hanocha. If he does an akira without a hanocha, then he's chayev. There's two cases where he can do an akira without a hanocha, and he's also midrabbanan. Now, as we mentioned before, and as the Gemara will point out, really there are an extra two derabbanans, both for the balabais, and another two derabbanans for the ani if he does the hanocha without the akira. But our Tana is not mentioning hanocha. Our Tana is mentioning the akira, but not the hanocha. We'll see why in the Gemara.